She accused a black man of a crime, called the police, and stood in the way of his dream without even knowing he was the owner of the park. Her lies destroyed her life, but that was only the beginning. What happened next would shock even the most seasoned observers. But let's start from the beginning. The morning sun illuminated the lush expanse of Greenhaven Park. Karen Whitfield, ever confident in her sense of authority, was heading to the park for her usual morning walk. A latte in hand and a look of unshakable determination on her face, she approached the entrance. Her attention was quickly drawn to a black man dressed in casual clothing, engrossed in studying a site plan on a tablet. "Well, this is new," Karen muttered under her breath. Tightening her grip on her bag, she marched straight toward him. "Hey, you!" Karen called out sharply, stopping directly in front of the man. "What are you doing here? This is no place for loitering." The man, clearly taken aback by her abrupt tone, responded calmly. "I'm surveying the area to assess the park's current condition." Karen narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "Surveying?" she repeated with clear disdain. "You have no right to be here. This is a safe neighborhood, and people like you ruin the image." The man, striving to remain composed, tried to explain. "Ma'am, I'm working on a project to improve this park." But Karen wasn't listening. Blocking his path to the park, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, police?" she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "There's a suspicious man here. He's acting aggressively and might be up to something illegal. Please send someone immediately." The man let out a heavy sigh, realizing that arguing was futile. A small crowd began to gather, some pulling out their own phones to record the incident. A woman in the crowd quietly asked him, "Do you need help?" "Everything's under control," he replied, noticing Karen waving her phone dramatically, loudly describing the threat. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, the man stood still, patiently waiting for the situation to resolve. The tension in the crowd was palpable. Some were outraged at the unfolding scene, while others watched with curious anticipation. It felt as though this was only the beginning. The wailing sirens of the police car shattered the morning calm of the park. Two officers, Janelle Ramirez and Paul Harris, stepped out of the vehicle, assessing the scene. Karen immediately rushed toward them, waving her hands dramatically. "Finally!" she exclaimed. "This man is suspicious. He threatened me. He shouldn't be here." Officer Ramirez gave her a calm nod before turning to the man. "Good morning, sir. May I have your name and the reason for your presence here?" The man handed over his documents. "My name is Marcus Reed. I'm here to inspect the area." Karen interrupted, her voice rising. "Don't listen to him. He's lying. Look at him. Does he look like someone who could be working here?" Officer Ramirez gave Karen a stern look. "Ma'am, please calm down. We'll handle this." While the officers checked Marcus's documents, the crowd continued to grow. Some onlookers began quietly expressing their support for Marcus. "I've seen him here before," said an elderly woman with a dog. "He's always carrying that tablet. He's definitely not a criminal." Karen turned red with anger. "You're all so naive. He's up to something. I'm sure of it." At that moment, the officers completed their check. Janelle Ramirez, after glancing at the tablet screen, looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, Mr. Reed is the owner of this park. He purchased it a few months ago and is currently working on a renovation project." Karen stepped back, her face pale. That's impossible," she stammered. "It's possible, ma'am," Officer Harris said firmly. "And I suggest you refrain from making false accusations." The crowd began murmuring among themselves. Karen glanced around, realizing that no one supported her claims. Meanwhile, a bystander had recorded the entire incident on their phone and had already posted it online. Marcus, still calm, looked at Karen. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern for safety, but maybe next time, ask before jumping to conclusions." Karen stood frozen in shock as the officers began to disperse, and Marcus walked further into the park. Yet this was only the beginning of the storm that would soon ripple through the entire town. The next day, the internet exploded. The video of Karen accusing a black man at the park entrance had amassed thousands of views overnight. Headlines across social media screamed, "Karen versus park owner, a shameful display of racism." Karen sat in her kitchen, clutching a cup of coffee while scrolling through her phone. Notifications poured in non-stop. She opened Facebook, hoping to find some support, but the comments were far from what she expected. "This is the perfect example of bias in action. She didn't even bother to check the facts. Fire her. There's no place for people like this in our society." Desperate to defend herself, Karen began responding to comments, but each attempt only made things worse. Later that day, her employer contacted her. "Karen," her manager said over the phone, "we have to let you go. This incident has severely damaged the company's reputation." Karen felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Her face burned with shame as the weight of the situation sank in. Meanwhile, Marcus decided to channel the attention into something positive. He recorded a short video explaining his mission: to restore the park, make it accessible to everyone, and create a space where people from all walks of life could come together. "This park belongs to all of us," he said in the video. "I believe we can make it better together." Marcus's video went viral, spreading as quickly as the footage of the confrontation. People from across the city flooded the comments with messages of support. Karen, however, faced the harsh consequences of her actions. Her street, once a place of familiarity, now greeted her with judgment. Neighbors no longer waved, and her friends remained silent. Unable to handle the scrutiny, Karen retreated into her home, shutting herself off from the outside world. Her name had become a symbol of prejudice, and the fallout of her mistake shattered her comfortable existence. Yet, amid the despair, a seed of self-reflection began to take root within Karen. Perhaps it was time to confront her beliefs and reevaluate the way she saw the world. A week had passed since the incident, but for Karen, each day felt like a trial. She couldn't step outside without feeling the piercing stares of her neighbors. Her name had become synonymous with prejudice and intolerance, and the weight of that label was unbearable. Sleepless nights consumed her as her mind replayed the events, tormenting her with the same question: how could I have made such a mistake? One morning, sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, Karen saw a familiar face on the news. It was Marcus Reed, the very man she had wronged. In a short interview, he spoke passionately about his park renovation project. "We're creating a space for everyone, regardless of their background," Marcus said. "The park will be a place where people can forget their biases and come together." Karen felt a pang of emotion. For the first time, she truly saw the man she had accused. His vision, his dedication, it all struck a chord. This place could become a bridge between people, she thought. The next morning, fighting through her shame and fear, Karen decided to go to the park. Her hands trembled as she approached the entrance. Passers-by recognized her, whispering among themselves. She avoided their gazes, her heart pounding. By the pond, she saw Marcus standing in a circle of people, enthusiastically explaining his renovation plans. Karen froze for a moment, then summoned her courage and stepped forward. "Mr. Reed," she began, her voice unsteady but determined. Marcus turned to her, his gaze fixing on her face. Karen knew he recognized her. The chatter around them died as the crowd waited, curious about what would happen next. "I want to apologize for my behavior," Karen said, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I was unfair and rude. I'm deeply ashamed that I let my prejudices guide me." The crowd was silent, all eyes on Marcus, waiting for his response. He studied Karen for what felt like an eternity before finally speaking. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is what we do afterward." Karen exhaled, relieved but aware that an apology alone wasn't enough. "I'd like to help with the park," she continued, her voice stronger now. "If that's possible, I want to make amends for what I've done." Marcus smiled and extended his hand. "If you're ready to work for the good of the community, we'll gladly have you." Those words marked the start of a new chapter for Karen. She threw herself into the park's renovation project, determined to make a difference. At community meetings, she listened to the stories of residents she had once overlooked. She worked alongside volunteers, painting benches, picking up trash, and planting trees. Over time, Karen became a symbol of transformation. Her story of self-reflection and change inspired others. When the park was finally completed, Marcus invited her to speak at the grand opening ceremony. "I stand here today not as a model of perfection," Karen said, addressing the gathered crowd, "but as a reminder that people can change. This park is not just a place. It's a symbol of what we can build together when we set aside our differences." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus patted her on the shoulder and whispered, "You've come a long way, Karen." Greenhaven Park became a haven of unity, a place where people of all backgrounds could connect. Karen's transformation showed that acknowledging mistakes and working to make amends could not only change a person, but also bring a community closer together.